Welcome everyone to my tutorial on creating realistic stadiums in the Stadium Creator mode in MLB The Show. The mode has been around since the 2021 version of the game and has received several updates over the years, and this is just the latest iteration of that. I actually spend way more time making stadiums than actually playing the game these days, and I recently got a request from someone to make a little guide to making stadiums. I'll be focusing on how to create realistic stadiums that I think look cleaner than a lot of the default parks in the game. Now, if you want to make a stadium with a bunch of floating UFOs and dinosaurs, then you probably don't need my help with that, so go ahead and do what you want. But if you want to make a clean, creative, and realistic ballpark, then this is the video for you. So yeah, let's get started. So number one, you should start with your outfield wall. Your outfield wall is crucial to the design and style of your ballpark and is the most important thing to think about when starting a ballpark from scratch in this game. Yes, the game lets you change your walls piece by piece to make some completely absurd combinations, but you should 100% choose from one of the preset combinations the game provides first before doing anything else, and this will allow you to take your stadium online. There are hundreds to choose from, so pick something that is unique and then kind of design your stadium accordingly to emphasize the wall features. For example, higher sections of walls are often flush with outfield grandstands and always look nice, but there are really a ton of ways to get creative with this. Also, it's very hard and very annoying to redesign your ballpark in this game if you want to modify a wall height or a wall distance after the fact, so take your time and choose wisely right from the start. Remember, when hitting in the game, you'll also be looking at your outfield wall the entire time, so aesthetically you want to make something that is clean and interesting to look at. The most important tool when building stadiums is the snap feature. When placing objects of any kind, you can snap them to other objects or use it as a tool to line things up. This will help create large and straight concourses, fences, stands, or whatever else you might be creating. And even if you don't plan on connecting props together, it is incredibly useful creating clean and straight lines in general. This allows you to place objects and stands as close to the outfield wall as possible and also eliminate any weird dead spots or gaps that would look out of place. Understanding this snap concept will elevate your stadium significantly. The first of several common mistakes I see in a lot of people's design is the overall lack of a basic understanding of sightlines. I could talk hours about everything that goes into a ballpark, from light towers, gated entries, level concourses, and really anything else, but every time you create these aspects of your stadium, you have to consider if it makes sense. The most common and bad example of this includes seating sections that have huge blind spots on the field, or suites that are way too high or too close, scoreboards that are not visible from the majority of the seats, or no points of entry into the stadium, just to name a few. The more of these aspects that are not in your park, the less realistic it will look. For example, an MLB park with no light towers or an outfield concourse will not look good at all. When designing, move your camera to the fan's perspective to make sure the stands and scoreboards look as they should. There are some obvious concessions you have to make due to the limitations of the game mode, but you should pack your stadium with as many of these features while maintaining sightlines that make sense. Another big issue I see is with a lot of created stadiums, there's often zero thought put into the flow of the stadium itself. Seating sections or concession areas will simply end into the middle of nowhere, and it just makes no sense. This will make your stadium look cheap, rushed, and extremely unrealistic. Concourses and end caps fix all of this. The game comes with several materials including brick, concrete, marble, and wood to help. Place these materials over any large empty spaces to create walking areas for your stadium. You should also apply this to as many sections as memory will allow you for the best effect. Obviously, fans won't be walking around on them, but this will create a complete look, especially with the 2024 version. You now can add standing crowds. This part of the equation can take a while to line up and can be quite tedious, but the difference between creating concourses and just placing objects aimlessly around is huge if you're going for a realistic ballpark. And the final huge mistake I see all the time is the overuse of features. The game has quite the selection of awesome objects, including buildings, kid zones, restaurants, water slides, you name it. Just remember that every time you place one of these unique features in, it will take attention away from anything else you build and becomes less of a focal point. This can again make your stadium look very messy, lazy, and fast. You should pick a couple eye-popping features at most and design around those ideas. This will actually highlight those features even more. For example, if you have 17 pools, it will look unrealistic and bad, and it kind of takes the attention away. But if you have a single pool in the outfield, like a suite of some sort, then this will actually highlight that decision. Also, every feature does eat a ton of memory in the game, so limiting excessive use of them will help your overall design. If you're having trouble filling up your stadium, you should use concourses, landscaping, signs, and scoreboards, and you will have a much more authentic feel without the stadium looking empty. The biggest flaw to the game mode is the fact that we have to use the same generic field for every stadium, which includes the on-field bullpens. Such few stadiums have on-field bullpens in real life that it's unfortunate that this is the only option, and subsequently creates these huge foul territories, preventing us from creating angles, like angled stands down the foul lines. That being said, you should absolutely create fake bullpens if you're trying to make a realistic stadium, and it will look way more complete. There are tons of ways to do this, but here are some of the common things that I use. There's a kids zone bullpen that you can stack. You can use landscaping, or you can use the batting cage feature and then design stands around it. There's a number of options you can do to create fake bullpens, and I could create a longer video in the future to kind of highlight some of this, but it's absolutely something you need to think about when creating your ballpark. As you can tell already, there's a set amount of memory space for the stadium you're creating. Every prop or object you create in the game will take up some percentage of your total memory available. If you are not careful, this can fill up very quickly and leave you with an unfinished stadium. The best way to avoid this is to repeat the same objects you're using as much as possible. Every unique object will take up significantly more space versus using the same one over and over. So for example, when creating your stands, instead of using 6 different types of suites, maybe use 2 but arrange them in different ways or stack them accordingly. Or when placing concession areas, spin them around in creative ways and see what else you can come up with. For example, I might sink a building into the ground to reuse the same asset, but it will look completely different in a different context. Also remember, if you can't see what you're adding from the in-game cameras, it might not be worth wasting memory space to include it in the game. This tip caters more towards larger style ballparks, but if you want to keep your ballpark fresh and looking less blocky and generic, you need to focus on creating unique and intriguing seating sections. For example, if you choose to place the same stands along an outfield wall the whole way around, it will just kind of look boring. But if you mix and match seating section, create tiers, add in suites, or in this now with the new crowds, we can actually create a lot of standing room sections. The combination of all of these items will make your ballpark way more inspired and less generic. So before you start building really anything, you should have a location idea picked out first. What is tricky about the Stadium Creator is that you can't just pick up and move your ballpark to any plot of land. So when you change the preset background scenery, it is often farther away than you might like, which makes it harder to build that ocean stadium you always wanted. That being said, the pre-built parks in the stadium have a huge mix of locations. For example, the island and tropical fields, your stadium will be way closer to the water than selecting the blank canvas option and choosing a coastal background. You definitely want to take a look at the pre-made parks, find the one that fits the theme of your bar park in terms of the location, and then delete absolutely everything from the plot of the land you don't want to use before starting. And that way you have a completely empty, blank stadium as close to the background as possible. And my last tip here is the most obvious and basic for this entire list, but before you start designing something, you should have an idea of what you want to build first. Are you trying to create your old high school or college ballpark, or are you trying to build a massive multi-decked MLB park? There are props and assets that fit any one of these categories, and using matching items will create a more realistic aesthetic for whatever ballpark you are trying to create. The larger the ballpark, the more time and assets you will need to spend on designing your stands and structures, which means less for your background and surrounding area. For example, in this video alone, I showed you an MLB style stadium that I made from scratch, a spring training style stadium that is based on a real actual stadium, and then a couple made up minor league ballparks. All of these decisions greatly affect how much memory you can dedicate to one specific section. And there you have it. Those are my top 10 tricks and tips for designing realistic stadiums in MLB The Show. If there's enough interest, I can do an advanced tutorial for designing stadiums in the future, or do a full dive into a lot of the things I talked about. So let me know in the comments any questions you might have on how to use this tool effectively. I personally love baseball stadiums in real life, and I'm a little more than halfway to seeing them all in person. So the fact I can take this interest into my own hands and kind of make my own ballpark in a video game makes this a really underrated feature in any sports video game out there. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. And again, if you want to see more, let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you next time.